This is Transqat. What is Transqat? Transqat is a safe space. It's a place for respectful conversations about transgender issues. It's a place for queer people to come tell their stories. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. Back in October, I did an episode with fellow members of the Outfilm Connecticut committee ahead of our annual festival. Just a heads up, this year, 2024, the festival is returning to June. You can get the details as they emerge at outfilmct.org. I was responsible during the festival for conducting a series of interviews with creators to accompany the virtual screenings, and you can find these both on the Transqat website and at the Outfilm page. Far and away, my favorite conversation was with today's guests. I felt like we'd known each other forever, and I am delighted to reunite with them for a full hour. I love these guys. Mauricio Pita is the producer and star of the short film Safe Word. Christopher Cunetto is the writer and the director. Now, at this point, unless you were at the festival, you probably haven't seen the film yet. That's okay. As we discuss in this episode, it will eventually find a home, and Transqat will provide links for you. The three of us got in-depth about Safe Word, but we also worked to keep the episode spoiler-free. The themes of this film are universal and compelling, and I believe even without the visuals, our conversation is well worth your time. Please enjoy. Anything you guys want to talk about before we get rolling?
I like Christopher's jacket.
Thanks.
Where'd you get that?
I got this in St. Louis when I was there for the holiday.
It's cool.
It is. Is it warm?
It is. It's also 100% natural fibers, which my sister would be really happy about. She's big into natural clothing and not putting more microplastics into our bodies.
Well, one of the challenges that we have in talking today is that the last time I spoke to you guys, it was for an audience who had already seen the film. And I'm assuming that most of the people who will be listening to this episode have not yet. So let's first things first, let me just have the two of you introduce yourselves.
My name is Mauricio Pita. I am the executive producer and actor of Safe Word.
And my name is Christopher Cunetto, and I'm a writer-director, and I'm the director and co-writer of Safe Word, which is a short film.
And I wanted to point out that this is a film that we showed at the Outfilm Connecticut Festival this year in, I want to say, October. Safe Word, far and away, was my favorite offering of the festival. At this point, the three of us have been trying to sit down for a while now, and so every time it gets rebooted, I go back and rewatch it. So at this point, I'm up to like 7 or 8 times. And,
wow.
You know the film better than us.
Yeah, basically. I have some notes.
Yeah, exactly.
So give me the elevator pitch. What is Safe Word?
Safe Word is a short film that explores ideas and asks questions about what happens when you are confronted with a new narrative, a new story that you tell yourself about yourself. It's a short film that explores how we find love and vulnerability and connection. The scenario, the characters surround Cesar, who's kind of a self-loathing masochist who hires Bear, a dom, to come to his home. And basically, their version of dom-sub relationship is like verbal degradation. And for Cesar, this reinforces what he believes is true about himself. Till one day, Bear decides to kind of interrupt this pattern, and a new dynamic unfolds between them. And so the drama really is between, whether or not Bear is going to be able to get through to Cesar and whether Cesar can accept a new way of thinking about himself that's more kind and more loving.
And Mauricio, you are Cesar.
Yeah, I am Cesar. Yeah, I would say that the film, I mean, Christopher said it really well, but yes, I am Cesar in the movie, and the film is very personal to me because I am the character in many ways more than one. The film was created over the fact that I had been struggling a lot with my internalizer. I still do. And I wanted to tell that story to sort of see if I can find community and connection. And my skill set is in storytelling, right? I've been doing theater for a long time. And so, yeah, that's what the film really, and so the film allowed me an opportunity to sort of dive in and explore what it would be like to challenge that narrative within myself. And so Christopher and another co-writer, Eva von Schweinitz. But yeah, Cesar, a masochist, he must confront that self-loathing. And sometimes the only way that we can confront our own loathing is when we are challenged, that the rules of engagement in which we operate are challenged. It's the only way sometimes to find change. So
Well,
that's what
the longer things go unchallenged, the more you stay in isolation with those beliefs, the more ingrained it becomes. And if it sounds like I'm talking from personal experience there, I am. And that's the the self-loathing that Cesar shows on the screen in this film is different than mine because I think mine is kind of tied into the dysphoria. But Cesar makes comments about his body, and in fact, when the movie opens up, there is a scene of him checking
Yeah.
himself in the mirror, right, and not
That-
being happy with what he sees.
That's right. And I have experienced that myself. I haven't been comfortable in my body for my whole life. And it's not to do with dysphoria, obviously, but it has to do that it's not up to par with the expectations that have been set up for me. And there, and I, sometimes I would get really annoyed at the fact that people would bring up all of this. They would point out everything that was wrong with me and then I would internalize it. And then when I would share it, like, oh, well, but I'm too skinny and I have acne and I have all of these things, then people would go, no, 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 you're fine, you're fine. And I go, so I'm confused because I've been listening to this whole thing my whole life and then now you're saying that it's not, that I'm just making it up, that I'm
Right.
being mean to myself. Well, what is
It's
it? Which is it?
it's like here's you, and people will just hold you to a different standard than what you are, rather than just letting this be what it is. I feel like it's a really common experience for a lot straight and queer alike
Yeah.
to be like, I'm not the perfect iteration of this body that I'm in. And it was actually really interesting on set too, because I felt like I was working through my own baggage via the work of unpacking and creating and exploring the emotions of these characters on set, because we were really living in those moments. We were trying to find like the kernel of truth, the true experiences that inform these emotional actions. And it felt very real. And so in a way, it was kind of therapeutic. At one point we had, some people on our crew just kind of get emotional. There's a point in the film when Bear kind of turns the tables, not in a non-consensual way. And it's when those new, like, more loving messages are introduced. And, some of our crew just, it made them really emotional because they were saying, this is what I want. This is what I dream of. Like, I hearing those things like cracked something open in me that I kind of wasn't really aware of before. And so it was just, I think, a little bit unanticipated just on my part, like that I would experience some kind of personal growth just making that art. But that's best case scenario. Like, what a gift.
Well, that's the beauty of art, that your film is it's a short film, it's very condensed, it moves very smoothly along, and it's got this specific setting. But the themes, the things that it's really talking about are so much closer to the universal that, it's again, let me just speak for myself. I've never had that sort of circumstance where I had a dom sub relationship. I've never paid anyone to come in to be with me that way, but I certainly understand what's going on with both of those characters.
I was just gonna say that's to me, that's mission success as a filmmaker, because that's one of my primary goals and values as a filmmaker, is to show kind of the universality of a lot of our real core emotions, even though the expression and the specific, set dressings for those emotions may be different. We all feel like these very similar basic human things, like a desire for connection and love and a struggle to find vulnerability, and a struggle to find your way in the world, to find out who you are, to be brave enough to be who you are. Like, these are not, maybe they're a little bit more highlighted or contrasted in the queer community because we are marginalized culturally, but it's something that everybody experiences in their life. So as a filmmaker, it's wonderful to see that, audiences can identify with those core things, even though they're like, I've never done that, but I know how you feel. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Whether the sticking point for you is race or culture or disability, or you name it, this long list of things where you would internalize the culture's harmful messages. I think it speaks to that. Mauricio, you were going to say something and we cut you off.
No, 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 it's all good. I was just gonna say that, it's particularly for the queer community, and I don't want to generalize, but my experience is that I've constantly gotten messages of over sexualization it's particularly for gay men, like if every time I go to a gay bar or every time I go to like consume any gay media, right,
Yeah.
all I see is like muscle, beautiful bodies, right? And an over sexualized environment, right? Where people are just really mainly focused on who do I hook up with and who's the hottest person I can hook up with, right? And so we also wanted to, just because the film, my hope is that it hooks people on a sexual way, right? That it gets
Mhm.
people into an entry point of, I'm about to see at least one hot
Sexy.
man.
Sexy.
One
No,
hot man,
no, go
something
back and
good.
fix
Ew.
that. Go back
Ew.
and fix that. There
I
are
know.
two hot men in
Two
this
hot
movie.
men. Base that, right? And then because that's the entry point, right? That's what we're trying to get people. And it is sexy. I just want to say the film is sexy, and then we turn it on its head and we open it up,
Yeah.
right? We say,
Mhm.
what's beyond that?
Mhm.
How we get, because ultimately, it's sort of like the focus. It's like our focus as queer people, for me, has been very sexual, right? But then what happens if all of a sudden we focus on the heart?
Yeah. It's so interesting that you are pulling on this thread, Mauricio. Literally last night, I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were kind of lamenting the fact that it's really challenging to, just like as a queer man, make a friend, because the entry point is that we're gonna
Have
hook up.
sex. Yeah.
Like, regardless of, because open relationships are so prominent in the gay community, and because the environment is so sexualized, it's like it's hard to find that heart that you're talking about, Mauricio, that emotional connection that we all crave. There's more to life than sex. Sex is great, but what happens when you want something in addition to that or different from that? And so, that new entry point, I think it just feels important. How do we create that in our community? How do we create room for platonic or like non-sexual but romantic connections, emotional connections that aren't necessarily physical?
Well, in the beginning, before we know what's going on, three objects are placed on a table, three symbols of what's coming. And there's a slip of paper and a mandarin orange, and then it's a
Ah,
length of rope.
Yeah.
Let's talk about each of those three. Then let's
yeah,
start with the last.
I
So
love
the
that.
the rope is there for what?
Well, the rope is there for their bondage play. And so Bear ties Caesar up with shibari rope work. Um, and then, the metaphor is right there. It
Mm-hmm.
represents Caesar's emotional restriction, the restriction he imposes on himself and ritualizes on himself.
Yeah. Agreed. Um, I also am curious to see what the audience thinks of, and also the choice of rope too, right? Like
Mm.
why that kind of rope work. And also getting tied up is fun, and it could be comforting for a lot of people too. It's an opportunity to give up control in a way that feels safe-ish in a way.
But what Cesar is being tied up for in this particular
Yeah.
situation is, as you said, is sort of verbal. And so there's the physical restraint, but he's about to receive a series of comments that are going to be hurtful and that he can't defend himself against, right?
Yeah.
The hands are restrained, the legs are restrained.
Yeah, I mean that it's like a combo thing, right? It's sort of like it's part of the play. Part of the play is the tying up, right? The physical restriction. And then on top of that, the reinforcement of the internalized narrative, right? It's sort of like this is somebody else defining who you are that already reaffirms what you belief with yourself. And that goes to that same original conversation we were having about reinforcing the ideas that we already have for ourselves, right? If we are receiving a certain message and then we get somebody else and other people to sort of reinforce that, all the things that we already believe within yourself, that can be comfortable. That can be comforting. That's where we get stuck. That's where we don't create movement, in my opinion, right? It's because it's what we're used to.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been
And
saying to myself, I'm worthless my whole life, and somebody tells me I'm worthless. Then I just go, well, yeah,
Yep.
I agree. It's all good. It makes sense. It's congruent with who I believe I
It
am.
doesn't create any cognitive dissonance. You don't have to
Amen.
change the way you think because it buys right into that.
That's right.
yeah, and we worked with a Shibari artist and someone who's really experienced in that kink community. And so I think it's also something that I want to point out that like this is something that Cesar does for himself. This isn't representative of the bondage community or the Shibari artistry in general. It's something that is specific to Cesar. It fulfills this role in his life. And, like Mauricio, you were talking about kind of the emotional role that the rope play has in Cesar's life. I think there's some crossover, some generalities for what, that kind of play can do for people. And then the other thing that I want to say too is that Bear, who is the expert here, is the one to identify really what's going on with Cesar. And so, our hope is that we're able to show like a very specific expression of this kind of play, this part of the community that's specific to Cesar, and kind of honor that like there are experts in the world who understand the role that this can play in individual lives. So, our my talk here isn't, I really don't want to generalize this community because it is so diverse, but really just kind of honor, what it can do for people and be really specific for our character, for Cesar, and for what he's going through.
And I have to tell you a little secret, exclusive. Just kidding. No. When I was getting tied up on set, I was getting a little turned on. Like, I just want to tell you that. And by the way, rope work is not something that I've done a lot out of. Like, I've done it a couple of times, right? Like, it's a fun thing. But I haven't done it in like years. And I'm like revealing all of this stuff. And then but when I was getting it done, like I was just like on set, like getting it done, and I was finding myself getting a little bit like,
There was a
oh,
charge.
yes, there is a charge. And the artist noticed not like physically noticed that I was but he noticed that there was
Your
a charge
energy
happening.
changed.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
tension happening within me. And then it's just so funny because I guess he was just like, "Oh yeah, you like that," but it wasn't awkward. It wasn't like anything like that. But I was just like, "Oh my God, it's so interesting to me
Well,
that I'm feeling this way right now, and I'm in like in this zone." But it just goes to show you the power that
well,
has.
it was fascinating too because there was so much care in those moments because the Shibari artist was acting with a lot of care toward Mauricio. Are you comfortable? Is this okay? We had to make sure that it was looking right on camera. And then we also kind of had to do kind of a quick training for Jonathan Adriel, who plays Bear, because we needed shots of Jonathan Ayer's hands tightening ropes. And so there was this moment on set where we were kind of as a group working in this art form and just giving Mauricio a lot of care. And that shifted the energy in the room too. And that's very pleasurable to see other humans just having such a, not like doting in like a bad way, but just like caring for you. Like, this is new, this is interesting. I'm experiencing a lot of care. And that is emotional stimulation too, which was just really interesting and beautiful.
Christopher, just quickly, you've referred to the shibari artist a couple times. Just tell folks a little bit about what that is.
So shibari is a specific form and pattern of like rope tying on the body, and it is comes from Japanese culture, and so it refers to kind of like ornate and very visually interesting patterns of rope tying that you can do to bind limbs to, other limbs. Like we had Cesar's arms bound together behind a chair. You can do the whole body. You can also suspend bodies with this rope tying art. And so it's meant to be very beautiful, very safe for the body, but also restrictive in ways that may be desirable or enjoyable. And so, there's a long, kind of history behind this specific type of like rope tying on the body.
And it does play, that scene does play with expectations, because when you see the arms tied so elegantly behind the back, I think the audience is expecting a certain thing, and what they get is this opening of heart, this real vulnerability, not even the physical aspect of it, because of course Cesar is safe in that moment, but
Yeah.
that vulnerability that comes of their interaction, and I think that's where things take that turn.
Well, early on, like thinking about turning this script, early on writing, there was a moment where I was like, okay, here's where we're starting. I know another film would be like, let's take you into like a sex sequence or a sexy sequence where we really focus on, you know, a form of a sex scene. And I was thinking that would be common. It would be used to engage the audience in a specific way. It would be used to set up a contrast for what comes later. But ultimately, like I made the choice, like, no, that's not what this is about. And it almost felt like if we were to include something that would be so sexualized that it would kind of disrespect what the gesture of the film is overall, because it's about, there's sexuality and the idea of physical pleasure, but then there's the idea of like sensuality and emotional pleasure and emotional movement. And to me, that's the core of the film. It is how the emotions feel in the body and what we do with that, and not necessarily how the body feels divorced from emotions, because that's a really common experience in the gay community. What does the body feel divorced of those emotions? I think it's easy to just live in that space because it's faster. It's just quicker. But the film, I really wanted to be in just a different space entirely. And so what you're talking about, which is like you expect that we go into this like sex scene or sexy situation, but we get something different, was, a really intentional choice. Like I remember that moment where I said, no, we're going that way.
The middle object on the table is this mandarin orange, and that becomes like light, which we definitely want to talk about, but it becomes something that is a touchstone throughout the short. So talk to me about the orange.
Well, I would love if Mauricio could talk about, because you acted it beautifully, the unraveling that you experience as a character, and kind of
Sure.
relate that to that symbol.
It's so funny because I've spoken to audiences and everybody has a different interpretation of what the Mandarin means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I've been asked, like, what is the, my favorite one is like, what is the orange? What's up with the orange? What's up with the orange? And I'm like, it's a mandarin. Get your fruits right. Get your citrus right. Um, Well, it serves as a metaphor for me. It serves as a metaphor for Caesar, right? It serves as a full metaphor of who he is. He is the Mandarin, right? And that's how I say it, right? Maybe people
Okay.
read it differently, and I'm curious. Comment below. Just kidding, no.
That's right.
We as queer people and as humans, we have beautiful, sweet. We all have the potential of that beautiful and sweet and delicious and nutritious and vitamin C inside of us, right? We
And
all
healthy.
and healthy. We all have that inside of us, right? And then we have this outer layer that protects us. And so what happens when we start to reveal and remove that outer layer, right? That protects that sweetness. And my like an our goal when we were producing is how do we draw a connection between Cesar and that, right? And we discovered that since Cesar has, he's self-conscious about many things about his body, but one of the things is his skin and his acne scars that, Mauricio Pita, the actor, also has, right? And sort of what's the correlation? And, it's the porous skin of the Mandarin, right? And there's a connection there. And as we begin to sort of peel off, not to be literal to the sense, how do we discover? How do we discover that beautiful sweetness? I will say also that to sort of piggyback out of something that I heard Christopher say earlier, it's like, what is riskier? What is more dangerous for us as a queer community? When I talk to people that are not in this community and I talk about kink, right? There's this shame and there's this like, "Ugh, I don't know about that." And yet, I find myself that's something that is easy and comfortable for me to talk about. But you get me talking about not me personally, but as a queer community, we to be intimate, to be vulnerable, to be open in a way that could be dangerous. That is real danger for a lot of us. That is real danger. And so that's why I feel like there's an over sexualization. Some people might disagree with me, and that's totally welcomed, but it's this idea that what we see and what we do with our bodies might actually be safer than what happens here,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So
Well,
that's it.
when Bear starts to go into, and because I'm aware of the fact that this is not a video medium, I am acting it out. For those of you at home, I am miming out
Yeah.
the Mandarin Orange. When Bear goes into it, there's bruising.
There is,
There's
Yeah.
there is the possibility, the real possibility of harm if you let that shell down.
Mhm.
yes, yes.
Mhm.
But is it worth the
What's the
risk?
reward?
Is it
Right.
worth the risk to bruise a little bit and then peel open slowly as you go through this process? And what happens? What happens? What happens within us, right? Because Barrett's not gonna live with, well, I don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen. But what does that do to Cesar after that? When you poke something, when you open something up, there is the tremendous risk of bruising, of pain, of feeling like your life is over, right? That you want to give up and you want to close out whatever's happening, you want to shut it down. What happens if you go through it? What happens if you go through it?
Sweet nectar comes out that is
Mm.
flavorful and interesting and enlivening. And that's also in the very same shot. The damage, the bruise happens, and then some juice escapes. And that juice is nutritious. And it is good for you in ways that are both pleasurable and just good for your body. So it's
And
a
it's the
it's a
whole point of having an orange.
yeah,
Nobody is eating an orange for the chewy
right.
bits.
No, exactly. We want to
Chips,
get to that sweet part, but it
yes.
requires work.
Yeah,
And
and that's
also
scary.
sometimes when I'm
Yeah.
peeling an orange, it hurts my fingers as the peeler.
Hmm.
It gets under my fingernails, and there's a moment of pain for me too. And so I think that's interesting because Bear's also having an experience here,
Oh, of
and
course he is.
he
Well, that's something we didn't get to talk about in the fall,
yeah,
and I wanted to go there because yeah, Bear is But in fact, let's start with talking about Bear's wardrobe. There are
Sure.
two scenes, and the first time we see him, okay, the thought I had was Billy Porter in the military. Um, um,
There it
and
is.
then the second time we see him, he transforms into something that was
Mhm.
completely unexpected for me.
Mhm.
So talk about Bear in relationship to that wardrobe change.
I'll talk a little bit about that, Christopher. Well, Ava von Schweitness came up with the idea of this character that we think of and we recognize in the queer community, revealing and opening up and transforming and shifting the power dynamics in that scene. And so, I mean, I want people to see the movie when it comes out for the general public, so I won't reveal what he changes to, but there's a complete shift of stereotype of what we think of when we think of that, when we think of a dom. And so we wanted to play with the stereotypes and the expectations that we have of people. I mean, I think that we all, when we walk around the streets and we wear something, we are sending a message of some kind, right? With our wardrobe and how we present ourselves to the world. And I think when people see Billy Porter in the military, which I love that, and we see Jonathan Adriel wear, that sort of very specific leather harness, sort of like that very leather outfit, we already kind of know who this person is, or what we can expect from it. And then we wanted to change and sort of see like this person can also be this other thing, right?
Yeah.
You can be more than one thing.
And it represents, what's going on in the film, which is self-disclosure and disclosing to the other your vulnerabilities. And as an expert, Bear is also modeling the behavior that he's asking Cesar to engage with. And so I think it speaks to just the intelligence and precision of that character. And one of the open questions of the film, too, because we see it through Cesar's eyes, I believe that's the primary perspective. One of the open questions is this just treatment for Cesar? Is that a possibility that Bear is just being the expert and helping Cesar grow? Or is what is going on in front of us, a true experience for Bear too? And I know what I feel about that. But the question is in the background, and I think that's because you identify so heavily with Cesar. Like, is this all real, or is just this part of the game? There's this idea in the film, the symbols, the structure, just the idea of contrast. Like you think this is happening, but actually, let's do this. Or this is what you expect, but the whole point of this film is to take you away from that and introduce something new to you. And I think that's what we should pursue as artists.
If I had been expecting that, the quality of this short film would immediately say, okay, I got to watch that again. I obviously was misdirected and was expecting this, but and go back and let's watch what it really is.
Right. It
I
depends on
mean,
the
I
audience.
agree with that. I agree
Yeah.
with that. I think that the term is a shock to the system,
Yeah.
a shift of expectations, a shift
Yeah.
of narrative, an idea of taking you into a journey that feels safe for you, feels comfortable. I want the audience to go through what Cesar goes through, right? You
Exactly.
know exactly what you're going to expect. You think that you are going to be safe in this environment because it's recognizable. And then all of a sudden, we're going to try to do something different with you. We're going to try to open you up, literally.
Yep.
And that is uncomfortable. There's going to be resistance that comes from that. And I don't mean that from an audience perspective, I mean that as a community.
The third item on the table is where we actually start, and that is with the safe word. It's a small piece of paper. It's folded so the audience can't see it, but we've seen earlier drafts. We've seen previous words that might be the safe word. And I didn't say this the last time we spoke because I knew that my audience there would not be interested. In here, I still know they're not interested, but it's my show, so I don't care. one of the words that Cesar tries and then crosses out is supercilious.
Yeah,
Do you guys know where that word comes from?
just
I
I
in
mean,
don't.
general.
it
I
means
personally
arrogant.
don't.
I know
I
what it means.
Yeah, so all right, well, let's go with that. Why supercilious? What does that mean?
I supercilious means either kind of like being superior to others or being kind of extraneous from what is important. And that felt like a very pertinent word for Cesar. I mean, maybe he thinks of this as something that is kind of inconsequential, yet at the same time important, or maybe more important than his real life. And so I think it introduces it's a way to show his psychology.
Supercilium is your eyebrow. And
Mm,
so if you're being supercilious, you probably have your eyebrow raised, that
mm,
sort of arrogant, haughty expression. There's a way, and we keep coming back to this, but there's a way in which Cesar is locked into his mindset, into his way of looking at things, and he knows exactly what he's paying Bear to do, and anything else he kind of thinks as being below that.
yeah,
He's raising his eyebrow at it.
yeah. And in terms of how it appears on the page, supercilious is up here, and then we get to in the opening the real word that he considers, which is stay. And that's the opening chapter of the film where he kind of undresses himself for the audience, free of dialogue, but using words. And it's a way to show us his psychological entry point and also to foreshadow what's going to happen.
The other the other bit of symbolism of metaphor, and the one that really drew me in the first couple of times I watched it, is this dancing flower, this solar, and again, I'm acting it out. I don't know why I'm miming the solar powered flower,
Yeah,
but we
it's
all
fun.
are now. Yeah. Um, it's and that's because this film very much speaks to whether or not you're going to choose to let the light in.
Yeah.
So
And
let's
That's right.
let's talk a little bit about light, both
yeah,
both literally in terms of how the film is made and figuratively in terms of Mauricio, your character's decisions.
well, that dancing flower is a really beautiful way to conceptualize what's going on in the film that Ava came up with. And she built the idea of light causing movement into the script that was just there from the beginning. And so, as a director, I mean, it's great. It's so visual. The dancing flower is so colorful and so shiny and so plastic and just a really interesting image. And then being able to use light on set to change what that object is doing. I mean, just from like the pure sensual experience of watching a film, like genius. Light is a big part of the film tonally. Earlier on in the film, the light is more overcast. It's cooler. It's overcast outside. The colors are more blue. And, as the emotional unfurling happens, I wanted to change how the images felt from kind of more dour, more dark to brighter, more warm, more inviting, contrasting what's happening in the exterior of the home because we actually got really lucky in that we found an on-location set that had six big picture windows that were behind the main stage of action in the film that have electronic shades that can rise up and down. From a filmmaking perspective, like the ability to control and shape natural light for the image was incredible. From a story perspective, having that built in to our set that could pull forward what was written already, which is a change in light that's being let into the space. We just lucked out so hard on that because as you're pulling into this conversation, it just adds to the metaphor and the experience of the film. There's a
And
question.
that shot, I've said this to you before, but that shot where Bear manipulates those electronic shutters is gorgeous. It's just, well, what a find.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a dancing flower was when I was reading the original draft of the script, and I was just like, what is a dancing flower? Like, what is this story? What is this getting to? And when I sat with it and I sort of thought about it more, I was really intrigued by the idea of something needing light to move, that it requires that kind of energy to activate itself. And there's something this piece of toy plastic thing that is just still and not moving, but it requires the actions of other people or the actions of solar light
Mhm.
to begin to sort of come to life.
Mhm.
And Christopher and the team really thought that it would be a really beautiful metaphor to show that when there's a shift in the character, that all of a sudden we can welcome some movement. And so I think what I'm trying to get is that it doesn't have to be, I mean, I'm trying to bring it back to a sort of a community point of perspective is it doesn't matter what the end product is of the dancing flower, meaning the dancing flower doesn't have an end point. It just needs to move. And
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes when we
Yeah.
open up and we welcome light, we just need to begin some movement. And you
Yeah.
notice that in the dancing flower is not moving like I'm gonna do it, but I'm moving really big right now, you
Hmm.
know. But it even if it's just a little bit of movement, that there's a shift and there's a change, and
Yeah.
that generating some movement, and that sometimes is all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And
momentum to start.
That's right.
in terms of how that is designed in the film, the first chapter is in darkness and shadow and cool light, isolation, lack of connection. The middle chapter, when Bear comes in and these new ideas, this emotional movement happens, it's brighter, it's sunny. The dancing flower is dancing. And then I don't think this is a spoiler, but we end the film at twilight, which is a mix of the two. And that's when Cesar begins to integrate what he has just experienced. And the dancing flower is still moving, but it is not moving as much as it was during, the really heightened emotional parts of the film. And that's really important to me, just as a statement for this film, and also as a person. Like, we go through these things, but like the reality is that we all live in this twilight of emotional and physical experience. And we need periods of quiet where we allow the small movements to happen after the big ones happen. And like if we can hold ourselves accountable to allow that space to occur for us, I think that's what sustainable emotional growth is, or sustainable vulnerability. It's this dance between, dance again. It's this oscillation between periods of high movement and challenge and periods of lower movement and integration. And, you know, I it, people may criticize this discussion in general that we're like casting generalizations about what the gay community goes through, but really it's about like it's what I want for all of us is to be safe enough with each other and with ourselves to live in that space of maybe it's just gentle movement and maybe we just hold that for
Mhm.
each other always, no matter what we're doing, even if it is just sex or even if it's an emotional connection, but holding that ability to have some kind of safe movement if it's not something giant or cataclysmic. It was just something that was on my mind a lot when working on the script and directing it. And it's what I want for us, queer people, us little humans.
Can I say something real quick about my therapist? My therapist and I have been talking a lot about, me feeling stuck. And I feel like I'm not alone in the world because I've been having a lot of conversations with queer people and my friends and colleagues who are like really feeling stuck in life. Like I don't
Yeah,
feel like I'm going anywhere. I don't feel like there's nothing happening.
yeah,
And what my therapist will always say to me is just like, even the fact that you're having these thoughts, even the fact that we're having this conversation and that we're living in this kind of space of questioning, that is movement. We are not
yes,
stuck just because we're actually having these conversations, that there's movement.
yeah,
We would be stuck if we weren't aware of the fact that we were.
yes,
If we are living in that constant state of stasis, of comfort, of being, well, if I'm comfortable and things are just, I'm happy where the things are, then why would there be a need to move? But my consensus and what I have experienced and talked about with folks is that especially now in this year and 2023 going into 2024, that there's a desire for movement, a desire for shift, a desire to change. And that's really what the Dancing Flower plays into this equation, so to reinforce that idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I really feel like that is Cesar's journey is from lack of awareness to awareness about this idea of emotional movement. And Mauricio, I mean, like what you're saying really resonates with me too, just my own journey from not knowing my patterns to being aware of them and the power that that gives you to choose something new. And it's just hard. It's just, and it feels, it's good, but it hurts. And so that's another way that like bondage is another metaphor, but like this feels good and this feels bad. And maybe that's just the deal.
Yeah. Well, we could just go on talking forever. I love, love, love talking to the two of you, but we are coming up on the end of the hour. So I'm gonna ask you a question, then I'm gonna let you think about it while I ask you a second question. That
Okay.
made absolutely no sense, but you'll follow along. The film really pivots on a moment where Bear needs Cesar to say something good about himself. Tell me one thing you like about yourself. And so I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell me one thing. And I'm looking at you, Mauricio. I want you to tell me one thing that you like about yourself. But before we do that, is there a place where people can get at this film right now?
That is a great question. We are actually in the middle of conversations for opening the film up for the general public. So we're looking at, I think people in the spring, early spring, will be able to access the film and see it for free. That's my goal, is to have it be accessible for everybody. And we're in conversations right now. So I'll just leave it at that. And so we'll let you know, and Claire will let you know.
I think like your listeners, we can give them a way to either sign up for notification when the film is released, or if this episode comes out at after the release, I'm sure we can find a way to get the listeners to
That would be
the
great if your
film.
listeners get
Yeah.
a link
That
to
would,
it and says, yeah,
because I want to hear what other people, how they
yeah, me
react to it.
too.
Yeah,
You.
it's
Me too.
that's the
Yeah.
whole
I want
point of
everybody
making
to see
art.
it. And my goal is to have it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, and Christopher, this might be a shock to the system, but it's not. I just want the film. I want everybody to see it. I want as many people to see it. So everywhere, my hope is to have it everywhere, all at once, so that way there are no eyes that don't get to see this. That's my goal.
There you go.
And I'm
There's your
gonna
takeaway.
work really hard to make sure that that happens.
Yeah.
Is it
Okay,
to answer the
so
question?
I'm gonna come to you with the question, but let me preface it by putting myself on the line. I
Yeah.
play a game with myself called Narcissist Radio. And it's this sad attempt to get me to say something nice about myself. I take love songs and I switch the first and second person pronouns
Mhm.
That's great.
so that I am forced to say romantic, sexy, kind things about myself. So, for example, I will find myself driving in the car and Prince's song Kiss will come on, and I will start, I don't have to be beautiful to be your girl. I don't have to be cool to rule your world. There's no particular sign you're more compatible with. You just want my extra time and my kiss.
Oh, I
And
love that exercise. Now I'm
I
thinking of all the
love
different
that.
songs.
right, I've started, by the way, you should send me your suggestions because I've started a Spotify playlist so that when I need to be kind to myself, I can go in there and do that.
That's great.
Thank
God,
I
I
you.
love
love
that. I love that.
So that's how hard it is for me to come up with something nice to say about myself. So I know I'm putting you on the spot. Tell me what you like about yourself.
Is it me first?
that. Yeah.
Sure. There's a lot. I see this is so hard for me. No, but there's a lot. I mean,
I'm going to look away, so I'm not.
no, it's all good. Um, I think I'm extremely resilient, tenacious, ambitious. I am hilarious. I am charm exemplified, and I'm saying it with the tone, but it's true. I think I am somebody who's extremely ambitious, tenacious, and I put in the work, and I am kind and funny, and I'm cute. And I'm just going to a physical place because I think that that's really hard for me. But I have beautiful eyes. I have a beautiful smile. I think that Bear is right to say that I have beautiful eyes. Yeah, there's a lot to love.
Well done. Well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you. Christopher, what do you love about yourself?
Ugh, I'm uncomfortable, but I I like my sensitivity. I'm a very emotional person just in general, and a lot of the time that feels like a liability just as an experience. But what I like about being so sensitive is that I can use that to care for others in a variety of ways. And I like that you mentioned humor, Mauricio, because I love to make people laugh as a way to make people feel good. It's just an easy thing to do. And so when I kind of am able to clock where someone is emotionally, I just like that I can meet them where they are and kind of create a relational space that feels good for both of us. So I like that about myself. And I try to be a safe relational space for everyone that I speak with. And I like that. And then I do think that physical is something to note just because it's also a challenge. And I like my legs. I've been cycling a lot and they're looking really strong and kind of big and thick, and I like that. And I'm happy about that for me right
Wow.
now. Yeah.
Do you bike indoors in the off season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like having the person on the video screen yelling at me to go faster. Maybe I'm not so different from Cesar after all.
I'll say
Got
this, when I first met Christopher, I thought that he was so cute. I first met Christopher and I was like, oh my God, he's so cute. This director's adorable. And then I got to work with him and I fell in love with his visual aesthetic and his ability to talk to actors and his ability to dive deep into the work and the psychology of people and the empathy and how he's opening up. I know that this was not supposed to be a compliment to
Oh
each other
God.
section, but I want
Nice.
to reinforce the good.
Well, likewise, I mean, I felt like
It was a love letter to each other.
no, just immediately, like, just clocking your willingness to just like go there. I was like, just as an artistic partner, the willingness to be brave in that is it's hard to find. And I think that there's definitely a like kindred spirit in terms of our approach to just like you said, Mauricio, the bravery and the resilience in attempting this.
And bravery is definitely at the core of this film. Your ability to go to some of those emotional places, both, as it exists in the script and in your interpretation of it, Mauricio,
Thank you.
that's what was a real gut punch. So thank you for being that brave.
Oh, thank you. That hit me. That resonates. Thanks. Thanks.
Guys, I love talking to you, but we got to go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We want to go to Connecticut and say hello. We should.
Yes,
Dinner on me.
Oh,
right.
now it's happening. Now it's
In
gonna happen.
fact, I know the place in New Haven where we should go. So let
Oh,
me know when you're in the neighborhood. Stay tuned because I will most certainly share information about the film's availability as soon as I get it. In the meantime, send me videos of your best impersonation of that wee plastic dancing flower. Housekeeping notes. The rescheduled event Journey into Gender for Alex Inc. is now Thursday, March 16th at 6:30. The venue has changed as well. We'll be at the Guilford Free Library in Guilford, Connecticut. No registration needed. It is an honor for me to be working with Tony Ferriolo, and I can't wait. Hope to see you there. Next up on Transqat is a conversation with Dr. Carl Streed, an associate professor at Boston University's School of Medicine and the research lead for the Gender Care Center at Boston Medical Center. Lastly, we are getting closer to episode 50, which means it's time for another clue as to my special guest. The previous clue was that their last name refers to a type of canine. Here's the new clue. The first name has 2 syllables, the first of which is a letter in the Greek alphabet. So, my guest's name starts with one of the following. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, psi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. And just to help you narrow it down a little bit, my guest is not named Omega Poodlewitz. This has been Clare McCarthy. Thanks for listening to Transqat. Let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question.
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.